understanding where you are emotionally, almost like emotional literacy. Like we love feelings wheels, which are, you can Google a feeling wheel and kind of look at what am I feeling right now when money comes up. We can begin to look at that. And if, for instance, if you notice, you know what, I go from not anxious at all to on a scale of 1 to 10, I am at an 11.5 of anxiety as soon as someone says money, then the next step would not be to learn more about money. It would be to practice a grounding skill.
Hey there, and welcome to Money and You. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. My search for more fulfilling work led me to career and business coaching, where I stumbled upon a game-changing discovery. Money issues often start with our mindset and habits. You see, our relationship with money is the key to overcoming those frustrating financial obstacles. As an entrepreneur, coach, and problem solver, I'm passionate about helping you create a great relationship with money. Because, turns out, that's the foundation for a limit-free life. Each week on Money and You, I speak with amazing guests about all things money, mindset, practical tips, and everything in between. We're here to give you new insights, education, and empowerment so money can be one of your favorite relationships. So join us for some lively conversations and let's transform your financial life together. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Money and You Show. I am super excited, as I often am when I do this show, but I have a repeat guest, and repeat guests get extra special love because for one thing, they're so wonderful that I love having them back, and they want to come back, so that means they like the show, and that makes me happy. So I am thrilled, especially this month, the month of May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so I'm thrilled to bring a expert in both areas, so finance and mental health. And I'm going to introduce her right now. She has been on before, and her name is Wendy Wright. And Wendy Wright is a leading financial therapist and CEO of Financial Therapy Solutions, LLC. With a background as a licensed therapist, money coach, and business owner, Wendy excels in meeting psychological insights with financial expertise. Her pioneering work in the field of financial therapy has transformed lives by addressing the emotional aspects of financial decision-making. Today, Wendy will share her insights on how to achieve a harmonious relationship with money and navigate the complexities of financial well-being. Wendy, welcome.
That is fantastic applause. I love it.
I know. Isn't that great? Yay. You deserve it. So, Wendy, thank you for coming back on the show. It's in the show notes, I'll put which episode you were on before because you were brilliant in that episode. And this way people can listen to both. But you brought it to my attention that this is an important month for mental health awareness. And so a perfect time to bring you back. And we've also got some other things going on that are causing a great deal of stress and anxiety right now. And so another great reason to have you on. And so I'm super excited to dive in with you today and talk about really financial well-being, how to alleviate some of the financial distress so that your money relationship can be everything you want it to be. So welcome.
Absolutely.
And, what are some of your just kind of overview ideas about, what's happening today, where people's mental health is today, and then we'll dive into how to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. First, thanks for having me back, Michelle. I love chatting with you, and we share this mission of helping people love their relationship with money instead of fear it. And as we know, current research really speaks to high levels of anxiety, high levels of fear, and not sure how to manage things, how it's going to turn out, what it's going to be like, how day-to-day news reels will impact our actual visit to the grocery store. When that feels uncertain, it can bring up a lot of distress. And that is the blending of money and emotions is the definition of financial therapy. I'm a financial therapist. I'm a licensed mental health, marriage and family therapist, and also a trained money coach. So I blend the two with a very unique skill set to be able to both help people manage their emotions, but also we talk about some management of actual money management tips and techniques.
Right. And it's so great that you do that. There just aren't enough therapists like you who really understand, the practical aspects of money and also, how to provide therapeutic help for people. So you're one of the few people I've met who really do this work in the way that you do. So I love that. And I actually forgot the marriage and family therapy aspect of this because, of course, money is such a source of conflict with couples. And so I think that's, I'm excited about this to talk about as well. So, finances, we did talk about this on our first show together, but there is so much stress around finances for people. And then for each individual, that stress comes from different places. It manifests in different ways. And so then you bring a couple together and there can be a lot of conflict. So I don't want to spend the whole time on couples, but since we're there, can you provide some thoughts and ideas around this topic?
Yes, money and couples partnerships, which even includes business partners.
Right.
If a couple of people are putting together a business, what happens often is we come into a partnership with a money story and money expectations, and often they are unspoken. So when you come in that way, then we really kind of tend to think everybody else thinks the way we do. I know I think that way.
Right, right.
So it's that's one of the most challenging things of partnerships and relationships is, oh, you thought about that differently. And so sometimes financial therapy for couples and partners can begin first just by naming meaning to the words that are used. So if someone, for instance, says, I feel anxious about money, I'm going to encourage them to put more words to that because the other partner may say, I feel anxious about money, but they may mean something totally different. So it's really helpful to put more words to it to begin to expand that communication, because that is a lot of what goes on when it comes to money work for couples and partners, communication and increasing the effectiveness of communication and the sort of the sustainability of communication can be really helpful for them.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I love that you said the sustainability of communication, because it's one thing to have, a talk about this, but it's another thing to keep those talks going. And I think without that, things fall apart again quickly and people forget. So
all the time. Yeah. Because it's scary to talk about. So you want the tendency to try to, this is also what makes it not work very well too, is you want to talk about everything today and let's just get it all out there kind of feeling. And that doesn't work. And then you leave feeling very unsatisfied, and then you don't want to revisit again for probably a decade.
Yeah.
And then you think, I don't know if we ever talk about money. And that's how we do it with ourselves too. We don't even talk to ourselves about money very much. Or maybe we don't talk very nicely to ourselves about it, or we don't talk about it at all, or we just tell ourselves what we're doing wrong. And so until we build a path, some of the action steps that I give people are ways to build a path toward a more sustainable conversation pattern.
That's great. And I do remember in the first show, you talking a lot about your self-talk, which I'm just going to refer people to that show because there was some great information there. And when I imagine a conversation with a couple around money, I imagine a lot of accusations. Well, you spend too much and you don't look at this and you don't do that. And then the other person coming and saying, but you don't do this and that. And I feel like there's a lot of it just devolves very quickly into complaining about what the person is not doing. And the way you explained how different we are with money, what bothers one person is not necessarily going to be seen as something, inappropriate, or so it's very complex. But how can people come at it without sort of that It escalates, I think, very quickly into being upset about what somebody's doing.
It really can escalate. And that is pretty important to notice, and to notice it without judging it. So my first principle of financial therapy is approaching it with compassionate curiosity and zero judgment. So when we have an escalation, we have moved away from compassion and curiosity. And often we're escalating maybe out of defensiveness because we're scared that we're maybe about to get caught or something, or have to look at something that we don't know how to look at yet. Because if you don't know what to do with an uncomfortable money situation, money number, then you kind of maybe want to avoid it because you don't know what to do with it yet. So when I'm guiding couples to talking about money, the first thing I try to have them do is have a 10 to 20 minute with a timer on. I find it really, really helpful to turn on a timer conversation to talk about talking about money, so that each of them can say, yeah, I want to talk about money, but it scares me. Or, yeah, I want to talk about money, but it's more fun to avoid it. Or, I want to talk about money, but I don't know how it's going to go. How can we create this scenario? Then we take them into, now we're going to talk about it. Maybe this is a month later or a few weeks later. We're going to talk about it. And then I encourage them to start out with one goal each. Again, a time-sensitive conversation also keeps it from turning into sort of like a spiral, or that black hole, or devolving into conflict kind of thing. So if you both have one thing you want to talk about, that also reminds you that another really key important thing about money is to remember that money work is never done. So money talking is never done. So this next conversation that you're going to have about money is actually just one of probably 452,000 that you want to have over the course of a relationship's lifespan, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. And I feel like there's so much fear around it. And that fear is triggering. And so I think that makes the conversation more difficult. But what do you see in your work? What is this fear? Like, where's it coming from? Are you just afraid you're going to be broke? I mean, what is happening in people's minds that is affecting them so that these conversations are so difficult?
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you asked it that way, Michelle, because looking at what is this fear really, like what is underneath this? Because money stuff is generally not about money. And that's really hard for some people to wrap their brain around. But once you begin to, so one of the tips that I have is to take the money word out of the sentence. So now if we're like, oh, I'm really anxious about money, then we're able to say, I'm really anxious about, and honestly, Michelle, sometimes this can take people 10, 15 minutes to come up with another word because they're just like, I'm anxious about money. I'm anxious about money. This is it. I'm like, okay. And then maybe, okay, I'm anxious about running out of money. I'm anxious about not having a job next year. I'm anxious about not knowing how to talk to my kids about money. I'm anxious about not knowing how to talk about money without crying. That is very common actually for some of my clients, where they think I can't talk about it without crying, therefore I don't want to talk about it, right? So when we take the money word out, then we're able to say, okay, these are the things I'm scared of, and that increases understanding. And if it's a partnership, that can increase affection and connection, which those are goals of partnerships.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. I love the idea of taking the word out. It's language is so interesting. I mean, the way people communicate, if you have just a little tip like that, it can change the entire conversation. So
it really does. Isn't that wild?
Yeah. It is wild. Well, I love that. And, I suppose that goes for ourselves, just talking to ourselves as well, because we get very scared. And then we have this conversation about, what if I lose my job? And then what if this happens? And what if that happens? And, that also, a process to get underneath all of this is really important. Now, I don't know if you are in fear or in anxiety. Can you go there on your own, or do you need to be guided?
Ooh, that's a good, the answer is yes and no. Okay, that's good. Yeah. Can you go there on your own? Can you be guided? Now, I also like to write. So I have written workbooks and given presentations and things like that on this. And so I have what I now call the Financial Therapy Journal. And partly because I love to journal, I have a blog post why I journal, and it kind of takes you through why it helps me. Doesn't help everybody, but I also say if it doesn't help you, I give some tips, such as some people need to talk out loud. I like to write,
Yeah.
but if you like to talk out loud, take a walk, talk out loud. The neighbors will just think you're on your phone headset, right?
It's true.
But in the journal, one of the reasons that it can be helpful and that you can do it on your own is because one of the foundational exercises that I have, I call it breathe, intend, move. So we start with breath and just 3 or 4 breaths, just pausing, because pausing allows you to regulate your nervous system before you approach the money. Then we talk about intention setting. And this is really important because a lot of times we set intentions. No, we set goals that are actually intentions. So we want to have an intention, perhaps maybe I want to make X number of dollars, or I want to get out of debt. I want to have, I want my partner and I to understand each other better and not fight about money. Those are too big to be a goal. Okay. So they're broad. Then the move part is where you identify the action step. Now, right now, the journal is on sale, and I have 2 bonus workshops in the month of May since it is Mental Health Awareness Month. So if your listeners are catching this today, there's still time to sign up for that, where I walk you through this even more deeply, this exercise. But essentially, we're building in a pause, and then we're building in your hopes and dreams, and then some action steps that you can take in a short time period. When you take an action step and you see yourself do this, and there's lots of research on goal setting and taking the steps and building momentum. That's part of what it does. It cuts into the sort of that financial anxiety noise or that uncertainty of what I can do, and it brings you down to, okay, I can do this. Then you build on that. And to use a money metaphor, it's like putting deposits in the bank account instead of withdrawals.
Oh, I love that. I love all of this because I'm a huge journaler too. And I've had a journal in my mind that I've wanted to create forever. So every time somebody says I have a journal, I'm like, get on that journal.
Yes.
So thank you. Maybe it'll push me. But I love that you have this. I think journaling is just magical. I also like what you said about speaking out loud. That's not really something that I do that often, but there have been a few times when I've been in the car and I put my little, microphone on, and maybe I'll go into it to create a blog, for example. I'll just start talking. It's kind of therapeutic talking to yourself. I don't do it regularly, but as you brought that up, it is also a good way. But and then sometimes you can transcribe that and then you can reread it. So it's not a bad way to go. But and thank you for offering the journal and the workshops, because that sounds like a wonderful bonus with that. So I'll put all of that in the show notes so people can take advantage of that wonderful offer. And, you bring up a great point, which is this takes some doing. Whether you're, this is a practice, and what, this idea that your relationship with money is a forever thing. So it's, you will always be having conversations with others, with yourself, and learning. I, as you were talking about the couples, I was imagining what happens if both of the people are pretty financially literate. Versus people who maybe one is and one isn't, or both aren't. I think this idea, and I've thought this for a long time, but I am getting kind of more adamant about it. But we have to spend our lives learning about money, whether it's interesting to you or not. I mean, we're using it every day. So it's kind of ridiculous to not understand it better. And I just think that's part of what we need. It's sort of like nutrition. You really should learn, what those labels mean when you read them. So, what are your thoughts about this idea of financial literacy helping in this communication?
Yeah. it's to me, I love them too, because April is technically Financial Literacy Month, and then May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I put those two together in several blog posts and emails that I've put out because I think they come together very nicely. And I think, Michelle, I think part of what you're really speaking to, if it's okay to use the word shame here, because I think what we're bumping into is the role shame can play in our ability to communicate with ourselves or communicate with others, because shame is constantly, it's a bully. It's constantly saying, you don't know what you're talking about. You're stupid. You're bad with money. All of these kind of things. And if that's true, if you are bad with money, which I don't believe is a thing. So, then you can't move forward. You can't really have a conversation. So when we decrease the shame and we create a more neutral environment, that's that compassionate curiosity and zero judgment, then we can begin to approach it. And so for instance, for a couple, if one appears to have maybe more financial data point information than the other, then we want to build a path to have communication that speaks to both of their brains, because sometimes we don't speak spreadsheet, quote unquote, but that doesn't mean we're bad with money. But I do run into a lot of people who assume that if they're not comfortable spreadsheets, they can't do money, which is not true. So when we begin to pause and look at, okay, how does your brain look at this data? How does your brain interpret? Because, for instance, one way a lot of my clients have found helpful is to put the money numbers in a sentence. And I literally have them write the sentence, which is very different than fill in the points on the spreadsheet. So they write the sentence out. Maybe they're trying to build a business plan and they're like, I want to have this much income. And they put the number in the sentence, and all of a sudden their brain can absorb it differently. Does that make sense to you? Could you see that happening?
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Again, languaging. Yeah, it's great.
And recognizing your brain, like how does your brain work? What is the way your brain begins to take in data? So for a couple, if they can come together and first learn about how each other's brains processes information, then they're going to have more satisfying money communication, don't you think?
Absolutely. And the other thing that's coming to mind as you're speaking is, the financial world is very broad. I mean, there are a million aspects to it. So, and I think people are interested in certain things more than others. And I think as a couple, it's okay for you to really understand budgeting or, savings, and for somebody else to become more of an expert in something else, in real estate or whatever they might be interested in. And so this whole idea of being smart with money, none of us are so well versed in every aspect of it. I mean, that is not typical. But and I feel like people have a weird understanding of that. Like they feel like they have to be an expert in all these different areas to be good with money. Whereas I think you just have to be continually looking at it, gaining understanding, and maybe you find those areas that you want to learn about. I'm kind of leaning into the mental health awareness idea and trying to figure out how you can feel more mentally healthy around money without knowing everything there is to know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a t-shirt. You can be more mentally healthy around money without knowing everything there is to know. Yes, that's a t-shirt. We'll print those because absolutely nobody knows everything about money. It is not a destination, right?
Yeah.
It's a process. And having that ability to have this really warm and welcoming environment to learning is so cool. So I love how you said that. As we begin to look at that within our mental health. Yeah. So some of the key emotional states people may find themselves in with money can feel either maybe highly anxious or highly depressed. And anxiety leads to certain behaviors. Depression leads to other behaviors. both can feel hopeless, both can feel unprepared, both can feel behind, and they just sort of physically, the body reacts in a different way if that's an anxiety or a depression, for instance. Understanding where you are emotionally, almost like emotional literacy. Like we love feelings wheels, which are, you can Google a feeling wheel and kind of look at what am I feeling right now when money comes up. We can begin to look at that. And for instance, if you notice, you know what, I go from not anxious at all to, on a scale of 1 to 10, I am at an 11.5 of anxiety as soon as someone says money, then the next step would not be to learn more about money. It would be to practice a grounding skill. It would be to come into something to soothe your brain. And that may mean you put off the money conversation for 30 minutes while you take a walk or something like that, because you want to calm your brain first before you engage in a money conversation. And so being aware of what is your emotional state and how you can bring grounding, calming, soothing. You'll often hear people talk about nervous system regulation, those kind of words, to your system before engaging about money, because actually money details and data is the opposite of what's going to be helpful.
That's fascinating to me, especially because earlier this year I went to like a 3-day Dr. Joe Dispenza workshop, and I learned a lot about, mostly he was talking about brain coherence and dysregulation and regulation, and this concept that you can't learn and you can't make the best decisions if, you're basically dysregulated, for lack of a more professional term. But, and I found that really fascinating because, like you said, that really, and with money, something happens. We get triggered. We get, we see a bill that's too high, or we, get some talking to at work and we start worrying about our job security. These things put us into kind of a panic mode. And then we start thinking of, I better decide something, or I better, find a solution to this. And it's not the time. And I think that's a huge, important thing. I've started using that with my daughter. She calls me and she's panicked. I'm like, okay, first thing we're going to do, we're going to get rid of the panic and then we'll talk.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. One of the ways, this is an oversimplification, but this explanation has helped some people to look at your brain can only do so many things at once. So if your brain is highly anxious or highly depressed or like some sort of emotional state, because there are lots of other emotional states, I'm just kind of using those as common examples, it can't check the balance and figure out how to pay something, or it can't read. Sometimes I'll spend sessions helping someone read their pay stub, because when they're anxious about money, they can't read the pay stub. It blurs, like it just gets foggy in their brain. And so that's kind of one of the cool things about having this sort of work where someone can have me sit down with them and go over it. But we can't do that until we're calmer. Same thing with couples when they're fighting. Effective communication's done. It's over. So don't try to make a decision then until you're calm, until it feels safe enough to talk about things. Same principle.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's probably why sometimes these money conversations go all the way to we should break up. Right? Because you haven't pulled yourself out of that
or
state.
Kind of bringing up something they did 28 years ago, and I still remember when you didn't. Right?
I know.
Yeah. Because we've lost the point of the conversation.
That's fascinating. And there was something else that you said that made me really think, because there have been times when I've felt, that level of stress where I've read something, it wasn't a pay stub, but maybe I got a letter from the IRS or something and I read it and I'm in a panic and I think it says something, and then I go back and reread it, and it's like I read it wrong. My brain didn't even register what it was saying, and it wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was, which is very interesting that's what our brain can do.
Yes. Oh, thanks for sharing that example too, Michelle, because I bet a lot of your listeners have had that same thing happen and just thought there was something wrong with them. But no, this happens. It happens to me too. It just happens.
Yeah. We have to be very aware of the state of our brain, which is a big takeaway from me this year. Yeah, this is fascinating. So, I want to talk about something that you brought up before we got on the air because about affecting our mental health. I mean, the news affects it. I mean, what are you telling people right now where there's so much going on that could negatively affect you? I mean, personally, I'm always telling people, don't watch the news, don't do this, don't do that. I'm not sure people are listening, but that's my go-to is to turn off some of the noise. But how about, what are some things that people can do to kind of protect their mental health right now?
Yeah, because I'm getting asked that a lot, like what to do with the news. It's creating anxiety and
social
stress.
media. Yeah.
Social media. And I've even been interviewed from other media outlets recently about this too. So I think it's very much on the brain. There is the general consensus wisdom, watch less, consume less. What happens often though is if you are anxious, you will watch more, like noticing what's happening in your emotional state. So I shifted to telling people or to recommending people start thinking about curating their news sources. In other words, instead of, because we often do this with money, we're going to log into our money account and find out how bad we've done. Like that's not a way. We don't want to do that. We want to create a new dialogue of I want to look in this money and see what I want to know. Same thing with media of saying, what do I want to know? And how much time do I want to spend on this? So starting with that in mind, then you might want to know, couple of numbers, and I want to spend 20 minutes on it or less, possibly. The other thing too that I think is really powerful is listening to you're listening to a lot of all or nothing language if you're listening to media, because that is what piques our interest. If it sounds dramatic or or like a catastrophe, that's going to pique our interest. This is also very similar to how we language ourselves around money. We often will think either I'm good or bad. I'm bad with money. They're good with money. I'll never figure this out. Everyone else has it figured out. Like there's a lot of this all or nothing sort of one thing or the other in our internal dialogue with money. So when that's already happening in our heads and then it's happening from a news source, it's like this unintentional validation of the catastrophe that you've been fearing. So it's really helpful to know your own self, know your own thoughts, and recognize how that's going so that you can understand how this is going to be, how you're going to be impacted by someone else using very sort of like all or nothing language, for lack of a better word.
Yes. Yeah, that is.
I'm sorry, we'll cut this. Wendy, could you just turn your camera on and off? For some reason, your camera is frozen, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Now, there we go.
Do I need to repeat anything?
Nope. There you go.
Oh, there you back.
And we'll just cut that piece out. There we go.
Okay.
Can I still talk?
Yep.
What about the frozen part? Is it okay?
Yeah, we'll take care of it. Yeah.
You will. Okay. Yeah. Magically.
So smart.
Okay. And we're still recording, and just start from there.
Okay. So, yeah, Wendy, that's great advice. I think it's a struggle. It's a struggle for me. I mean, I have a lot of little mechanisms in place, and every now and then I'll just fall into a rabbit hole. And every time I am just like, really? I mean, I know better than this, because my whole, you feel it. I mean, it's a visceral sort of feeling that you shouldn't have gone there.
Right. Right.
Yeah, there is so much to talk about. We are unfortunately getting to the end of our conversation. I'd love for you to just sort of provide your insights around, this whole topic of mental health and money in whatever way you choose. If there's some tips or so you've already given a great number of tips, but if there's some sort of wrap up ideas that you want to convey, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Well, I think first I will say I appreciate your insight into having this conversation, because you are really, you're leading so many conversations about money, and that with the insight that there's a relationship with money. So I think that's really important for people to recognize. Money is not just a set of data points or a set of definitions that we don't understand, like what does this mean? But that it is something that we have a relationship with. And when we have a relationship with it, that in and of itself can speak to the fact that it can evolve and change over time and grow and all of those kind of, movement words that we're talking about versus you're bad with money, period, kind of thing. So recognizing, first of all, with insight that there is a lot of emotion connected with our money decision making, and that it's a relationship and it grows and changes over time. All of those things can begin to help soothe your frayed nerves, so to speak, if money creates anxiety and fear and you get sort of frozen around it, all of those things. Because really, we want to know that there's a way out, that this can get better. And I see it get better all the time. So I encourage people to absolutely re-listen to our discussion today, write down some of the tips and tricks that we talked about. Check out I have a quiz on my website that helps you identify what we call your money shadow, which is essentially just finding some new words for what might be getting in the way of having the best money life you want to have, having relaxed money, relaxed relationship with money. And then some of the journal prompts are there as well. So it can be really powerful to get those. And that's all at wendywrightfinancialtherapy.com.
That's great. Thank you, Wendy. And, another thing that just so you keep jogging my mind around things, but money is not just like a straight line kind of trajectory. I mean, things happen in life that, you're earning and you're saving and you're doing things. And then suddenly, whether it's whatever, I mean, things happen in your life. You have kids, you get divorced, things happen. And so from a mental health perspective, you have to be okay with the journey and the expectations. And so, I don't know, is there something that you tell people so they can ride these waves and deal with it?
Yeah. Well, I think you just made another T-shirt, Michelle. You have to be okay with the journey.
I'm going to go into that business, I think.
I know. We've got two already for our line. Yeah, absolutely. I think the sort of metaphors that imply movement, such as journey, growth, story. Often one of my favorite prompts is, what story do you want your money to tell? So that allows the fact that there we go. We got another T-shirt. Yeah. So having all of those sort of in your mind is really powerful. And that in and of itself is really new for a lot of people. So once you just begin to open that up, a lot of things flow from that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great answer. Well, Wendy, second time, I loved it. I'd love for you to come back for more. So you're a great guest and great insights. And what you're talking about is probably the most important thing. I mean, if money is damaging, your mental health, it's super important to take control of that. And and it's affecting everybody's mental health. I think that's another, just like we need to understand we have a relationship with money, we have to understand that it is constantly affecting our emotions, our moods, or everything. And so it's something not to be afraid of, but to work on. And I love that you're helping people do that. And so thank you. And thank you for all the interesting information you brought to the table. And thank you for the offer so people can continue to get more of this. So I'll be sure and put it all in the show notes. And just love having you on this program. I think, what you're doing is really helping people to understand this relationship with money and how to navigate it. So, as well as practical things. I mean, that comes first, but then the fact that you can also talk to them about their numbers is super great. So, thank you. And I will, I'll be following you, and I'd love to see your journal, which I'll put again in the show notes. And so, thank you for all you do and for coming on the show.
I love it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was great. And audience, thank you. We love it when you listen to the Money and You show. So please find me at limitfreelife.com. Reach out to me if you have questions or ideas or anything at Michelle at limitfreelife.com. You can find Wendy, and I'll put all of her information in the show notes, and reach out to her as well. Check out her upcoming journal workshops. And if you would like the layoff workshop, she has offered that very generously. So that's great. And if you enjoyed this show, if you know anybody who could benefit from this show, please share it. That's one of the things that it really helps us is if you share the show and also rate and review it. If you enjoyed it, then that would be wonderful. And, well, we'll see you next week on the Money and You show. Thank you, UBN Go, for bringing the show out into the world, and love doing the show. So thank you for watching.